Hello and welcome to MySecurityTV, our Tech and Sec Weekly. This is our Friday morning edition. My name is Chris Cubbage. I'm the Executive Editor and Director with MySecurity Media. We're going to dive into cybersecurity, and Virsec are making a move into the Australian and New Zealand market, and they are expanding their sort of market reach out for their application-aware workload protection offering. We're going to be joined by Rob Nobilo, who's their Regional Sales Director, and they're building their new team with Virsec here in the ANZ. So we'll look forward to speaking to Rob, Regional Sales Director for Australia and New Zealand, just joining the team. Rob, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Very good. Just a slight delay in my video, so I don't know whether it's at your end as well, but maybe introduce us to Virsec, and this is quite new. So they've put a team together and you're going to head up the sales. And it's a application-aware workload protection platform. So, yeah, maybe introduce us to your role and how you've what's a bit about your background. I think that might explain why Virsec have brought you on.
Yeah, sure. So originally from Palo Alto Networks. So I was at Palo Alto for around 4.5 years as Regional Sales Manager, looking after the Queensland market. Yeah, wasn't planning on leaving. Got a tap on the shoulder from Virsec, and yeah, the technology really jumped out at me. It's very different, very unique, nothing quite like it on the market. So yeah, it was just a no-brainer. And they asked me to come and lead the Australian business and grow the Australian business out. And I spoke to the CEO in the States, and seeing people who are joining the board, people like John Chambers, who ran Cisco for over 25 years. Jim Routh came on board. He's one of the most well-known CISOs in the industry. So just with the caliber of people who are joining the company, yeah, it was just I think it was just the right decision to make.
Fair enough. And they're based in San Jose. How long have they been around?
So the company started in around 2016. So I had some very smart people starting the company, people like Satya Gupta, Ray DeMayo. So these are people whose background were in software and microprocessors and chipsets, etc. So they built this from the ground up. We now have over 50 patents. But they originally started in 2016, as I mentioned. Didn't have a product for sale until 2019. However, onboarded a lot of defense contracts and US government. When GA ended 2019, and then obviously COVID hit, but we're still able to hit the ground running. Grew the business quite rapidly in the US, expanded into India and the Middle East, and now we're here in Australia. So they've hired me to grow the Australia and New Zealand business.
It's always the way. Sometimes the Australian market's sometimes the last one. They always go to Europe after the US. And have you got any early clients here, or are you starting cold?
No, so I started cold. So I was employee number 1, and Ben Burt, who joined me as well from Palo Alto Networks, he's employee number 2. So he's a regional technical director looking after ANZ. So our mission is to grow up the team. We want to build a channel-led business here. So I've already had quite a lot of success in that space. So the partners who we've already onboarded are people like Batum Solutions, who are a First Nation supplier, and they've been very supportive of us. And we're about to onboard the first female Indigenous Virsec system engineer.
Nice. They're up in Queensland, aren't they?
Up in Queensland, correct.
Yeah. Nice.
Also the likes of, so I chose my partners carefully. So NTT, Telstra, CyberSecurity, so big national players, very strong security practices. They've all jumped on board fairly early and fairly quickly. And then a few niche partners such as MOQ Digital, based up here in Queensland as well. The guys down in Murdoch Webster in Victoria. So I chose partners who I'd had experience with in the past, who were very technically astute in the security space. These are also people who, before I took the role, I actually spoke to and said, hey, what do you think of this tech? And the general consensus from everyone was, this is game-changing tech. If it does what it says it did on paper, then it was going to be good. So within a short period of time, we've already onboarded one major customer in Australia. Ben's July is extremely busy. We've got POVs running at least 10 other customers. we've got launch events that we've got in the works. So yeah, it's been very busy, very quick ramp up in a short amount of time. So, but we do have the support of the channel in Australia, which is good. So
very good. Maybe that's a good segue to tell us what it actually does and the game-changing aspect to it. So workflow, application level protection. Maybe just talk us through the platform.
Yeah,
and it's a SaaS, right? A SaaS model.
No, it's not.
Okay.
So it's a software. So basically, it's the first and only application-aware workload protection platform, and it incorporates system integrity assurance, application control, memory protection in a single solution across the entire workload. So whether that workload's on premise, in the cloud, or in containers, we are protecting the host layer, the memory layer, and the web layer. So there are no other technologies that can do the full stack. Through our patented technology, we've been able to map what an application does. So every application has an intended use, and so all we're doing, so rather than chasing bad, which your conventional tools are doing through signatures and ongoing tuning, etc., we're just enforcing good. So we're extending the zero trust security and automating that process into the workload, and enforcing a positive security model. And so once we've mapped all those processes, files, libraries, scripts, etc., we're able to then say, okay, this is known good, and then we're stopping anything malicious from happening. So, that gives us the abilities to stop the widest range of attacks, both known and unknown, with no signatures or no prior knowledge required.
And I take it that's using an algorithm of a learning algorithm, and this is something that's been done at the network level, but this is now being done at the workflow application level.
Yes and no. So this is a question posed to Ben and I, and what we're doing here at Virsec, we're trying to change people's perception of how security works. So we don't require any tuning, we don't require any ongoing learning. So there's no baseline period of say a month to be able to identify what the workloads are doing. Essentially, through the patented technology, we're able to, as soon as we load that sensor onto the workload, within a matter of seconds, we're able to identify all the processes, all the files, scripts, etc., and we map that instantly. So we create that zero trust model in a matter of seconds. So
is it an agent that goes out and does that?
Correct. Yes, on the workloads, whether they're on premise, in the cloud, or in containers.
Right. What's the business model? Is it per device, workflow? How does that work? Or users?
So it's per server, VM, or container.
Okay. And is it working with anything else? Is it something that and it's reporting process as well?
Yeah, sure.
Does it integrate, or does it sit up on the SOC, or what's it alerting to as well?
Yeah, sure. Look, it integrates really well, and I think the benefit of the product is, we're not an EDR tool, we're not a logging tool where we're logging every single event that comes onto the server itself. We're only stopping an attack, and so the richness of data that we actually provide, we can then send that information off into your own SIEM, or if you have an external SOC, an external SOC. It is quite rich data. We can also send that data as macro protections to your firewall. So if you have Palo Alto firewalls or whatever vendor firewalls in your environment, you can actually send macro protections where they can then create a signature to push that out to the rest of your environment.
And when you say it can stop an attack, what does it actually do? Because I think by the time it's at the application, depends on where it's come from as well, right? So how does it stop?
So look, we don't need any signatures, as I mentioned. We don't care about CVEs. As you're aware, CVEs are coming out every couple of hours now, if not longer. I think with the National Vulnerability Database, there's 2,000 vulnerabilities coming out a week. So we don't need any of that information. So with the uniqueness of our technology, we actually let the code run for a fraction of a second, see what that's doing. And because we're instrumented into the host layer, the memory layer, and the web layer, we can see if a malicious actor is trying to do something like a remote code execution or a buffer attack, and we just kill their process. So we're actually not affecting the process of the server itself. We're just stopping anything malicious from actually occurring. So, we're mapping what the application does, putting a guardrail up, and ensuring nothing from the outside can affect that process.
And I take it there's a bit of a backup to it as well, so it's protecting the data in that application as well in case it is compromised.
So the way that we map the file, so we map, as I mentioned, libraries, executables, any dependencies of the application itself. We also map all the files, so we can see if, and I'll use the example of SolarWinds when they were, or the recent Colonial attacks. Once they've used something like a remote code execution to get a foothold in the server, most conventional tools couldn't actually see that there was anything malicious in the actual server itself. So they're able to download PowerShell. So once they then try and do things like encrypt the files, we would block that process, but we would have actually blocked it higher up in a kill chain during the remote code execution piece. But for whatever reason, if you didn't have that turned on and just had our host layer of protection, because we map what the files are intended to do during the runtime of the application, we stop all these attacks in real time. So it's not an after the fact. It's all happening in runtime, in real time. So we know what the files are doing, and we know that those files shouldn't be encrypted or shouldn't be deleted.
And what's the alert process then? Do you identify what it is? Is there any forensic logs that you can provide? Yeah,
so there's a real richness of data there in terms of, so it's not just providing you with an IP address, it's giving you quite a lot of forensic data. I've been working with some of the local Splunk team locally and speaking with a few of the MSSPs around the richness of data and what they can do with that data. So we're looking at things like process IDs, what the actual attack was, if it was a SQL injection, what was the actual code that they were using. So there's quite a richness of data there. It's not just here's an IP address, here's where it came from. We go through quite a lot of context. So.
Okay, very interesting. And I suppose what is the early take up if it's quite unique? I think you've just got to get that awareness out to the market. Is there, you're up against some of the bigger competitors as well?
Yes and no. So our job essentially is more of an education piece. So because people are so, for the last 20 or 30 years from a security perspective, we've always been looking at a probabilistic model where we're continually chasing bad. It's always been around signatures and pattern matching and hashes. Even with the uptake in machine learning and artificial intelligence, there still needs to be some sort of baseline there. So part of my role and part of Ben's role is educating people on that's the old way of doing it. The new way of doing it is enforcing good, creating that zero trust model in runtime in real time. So we do compete a bit with some of your traditional endpoint vendors. We do compete also a little bit with your RASP and your WAF vendors, but from that full stack of security, we find that once we get into the demo, that's when people really understand it and really get it, and you get that aha moment from people. So you can see there are always parts in a meeting where you can see in the people's eyes when they finally get it. Okay, we understand how this works now. So it's pretty straightforward process. It goes from meeting demo into a POV, and then from the POV, goes from there.
I suppose you mentioned that. Where do you sort of sit on, say, a quad? Which quadrant are you put in? Are you in the EDR?
Yeah, we don't really have one. So at the moment, working with Gartner and other analysts, we're positioned in that cloud workload protection space. So even though we can work on premise, on physical, and in virtual, that seems to be where the Gartners are looking. In the most recent cloud workload protection analysis that they've done, there's a real focus on memory protection. So if you look at all the recent attacks like SolarWinds, Exchange attacks, they were attacks on memory. So we've got a fairly unique product in that space. No one can do what we do in that space. So yeah, it's hard to really explain who our competitors are. We have a lot of competitors, yet we don't really have any competitors that can do the full stack. I know that sounds lame, but
no, I think that's cybersecurity, isn't it? There's a lot of players out there, a lot of vendors. It's cutting through the noise often, particularly when the new one comes into the market. A lot of discussion. I think you're up against some discussion here in Australia on, you know, sovereignty and backing Australian cybersecurity companies as well. But
yeah,
you know, again, they still have to compete on these tools and be world class alongside that. And again, when you see new vendors coming out of San Jose and Silicon Valley, you've got to at least have a chat, particularly if they're coming in from Palo Alto Networks as well, getting their staff.
No, exactly. So look, yeah, it's been a pretty cool ride. If you look at our background, you know, we focus in that critical infrastructure space. So working a lot with defence and the US government and across the utility space. So you know, we're one of very few vendors who don't require a SaaS offering. So all of our software, all of our CMS sits on premise. So if you're looking at defence and a lot of government entities, you know, they like the fact that their data stays on site; it doesn't go anywhere else.
Yeah.
And we can work in air-gapped environments. We can work across SCADA environments. So you know, if I look at where most of our interest is at the moment, you know, it is in government and defence and across the ICS and SCADA space, and then moving into BFSI and the healthcare space. So
wow, that's pretty good. Yeah, I'm just looking at now. You got the protection of SCADA on any platform as well. Can you change the application policy as well? Are you able to change and push out policy, or is it more of a monitoring and protection tool?
Yeah, we don't need to. So we are a protection tool. So we're preventing anything bad happening on your workload. Now, we don't require any source code. Generally, when we have conversations, people assume that we have this heavyweight agent that's going to kill the process, because when vendors have tried to do this memory control flow in the past, they've killed servers or made servers unstable. So what we've been able to achieve is we've been able to, as memory gets loaded from disk into memory, we've been able to map what those memory transitions are. And then so when an attacker is trying to actually do things like a remote code execution or a ROP chain attack or a buffer overflow, we're able to stop their process without affecting your actual application itself. So as I mentioned, just putting a ring fence around what's good and stopping all the bad.
Nice. Well, you certainly look like you've been well versed into Virsec and you know your stuff. So thank you so much for that, Rob.
I appreciate it.
It's otherwise Virsec, virsec.com. Worth having a look, and no doubt we'll hear more from the Virsec team as they take it to, you're up there in Brisbane. COVID
Correct.
being okay and kind to you?
It was until about a week ago. No, it's picking up again. So I was lucky to make it out to Perth a couple of weeks ago, just before they went into lockdown. We've hired Ben, based out of Melbourne. I've made a couple of trips down to Canberra, so there's a lot of interest in Canberra, so we'll probably be hiring someone in Canberra. Due to the overwhelming reception from the channel, I'll be bringing on a channel person hopefully very soon. So it's it's spinning a lot of plates at the moment. So the growth the growth's been a lot faster than we had anticipated. So the hiring is going to happen a hell of a lot faster. So hopefully have another 6 people by the end of the year.
Wow, nice. Well, I think in the release was cybersecurity market in ANZ worth around $5 billion. So it's a market worth having a look at. And again, particularly with new technology, and given the state of the market, New South Wales education under a cyber attack at the moment, you've got Kaseya, there's no shortage of activity going on. So certainly it's top news. So good time to be on.
No, exactly.
Beautiful. We're not out of a job. Look, Rob, thank you so much. Let me just bring that up. Rob Nobilo, Regional Sales Director for ANZ with Virsec, a new entry to the Australian New Zealand cybersecurity market and their application-aware workload protection offering. Thank you so much, mate. I'll put you backstage, and we got there eventually, mate. You had a good morning.
Yeah, it was fun.
Cheers, Rob. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Okay, very good. And no chats today, so there's most of Sydney is in lockdown, unfortunately, but that is how it goes here. But otherwise, from the marketplace, our report of the day, and I might just raise that one because it's a bit easier to read. Hang on a second. There we go. So this is from Trend Micro, their latest research. In fact, we just touched on ICS and SCADA. This is a 2020 report on their latest report, but it's a 2020 report on threats affecting ICS endpoints. We've got a good ICS endpoints highlighted here in the Purdue model in their architecture, just on how that is. So if you're interested in the SCADA and ICS cybersecurity realm, this looked like a very good report and worth having a look through. Just highlighting the Purdue model there, and then also a breakdown of the ransomware that's affecting ICS systems in 2020. RIAC is up there, but also I think Blocker, there it is, and down at 2.1. For those top four being Nefilm, Knopi, and Lockbit as well. So it's a worth report. It's on the marketplace. Check it out. But the findings of that report was that ICS are increasingly under attack. So that's it from us on our Friday morning episode. We'll be back on Tuesday afternoon for our Tech and Sec Weekly, and we will be releasing a couple of other interviews. I mentioned that the CEO of Kaseya lined up for an interview on Monday, and also one with Secure ID RSA and their business development manager as well. So have a great weekend. If you're in Sydney, enjoy the lockdown. Otherwise, the rest of Australia and our listeners, have a great weekend. Thanks very much.